Hello, welcome to our first lecture. What is strategy and why is it important? In this chapter we have 4 learning objectives. The first thing that we want to know is what is strategy. So we will be talking about several ways that strategy can be defined. Second, we are going to talk about the concept of sustainable competitive advantage, which is a very important element of strategy. We also are going to talk about what the difference is between a business model and strategy, and why a business model is important for having your customer understand exactly what it is you're trying to sell them. And finally, we're going to talk about the 3 tests of a winning strategy. The core concept that we're going to start with is the definition of strategy. And according to your text, a company's strategy is the set of actions that its managers take to outperform company's competitors and achieve superior profitability. Well, the short version of that is, how do you do better than your competition? And the way that you keep score is with profitability. Profitability means that you're getting better returns on your investments than your competitors. Usually that means that you're making more money, more actual profit, but in addition to that, you are also getting a bigger return on your investment. So, what exactly do we mean by strategy? The first thing we want to think about is our present situation. And so we would be analyzing the business environment and particularly the industry conditions under which your business operates. Different industries require different approaches. Different industries have different characteristics, and so it's very important to understand what the industry is and how that business environment affects your potential choices. The other thing that we want to know about our present situation is, how are we already doing financially, and what is it that we actually know how to do within our company? What are we good at? Then, once we understand our present situation, we want to think about the vision for the future. What are we going to do next? What is our future direction? Where do we go from here? Have we not been performing well and we've got to turn things around? Or are we doing really well with our company, but we've got to figure out what's next? And whatever we decide to do, how are we going to get there? And what's key here is the idea of an action plan. What is an action plan that heads the firm in the direction that you want it to go? What is its position? How is it going to attract customers? And how are you going to actually get that financial result that you want? So why bother with strategy? Why is strategy so absolutely necessary for every company? A firm needs a strategy to specify what actions will be taken to, first of all, improve its financial performance. Second, what do we need to do to strengthen the competitive position of the company? And third, how do we gain a sustainable competitive advantage over our market rivals? If you look at these questions, it raises additional questions. First of all, if we want to improve our financial performance, what's wrong with it? Why is it not where we want it to be? Are our sales too low? Are our costs too high? How do we know? If we want to strengthen our competitive position, why is it weak? What is wrong with our competitive position? And if we're trying to think about competitive advantage, do we have one? And how does it compare to our competitors? There are many ways to understand strategy, and what we're going to be talking about for the remainder of this lecture are all of the many ways that you can understand what strategy is about. Strategy is something that I like to call a meta concept. M-E-T-A, a meta concept. That means it's overarching, and that means that a lot of things come under it. One of the things we're going to start with in this chapter are all of the different ways that you can understand strategy. First of all, strategy is a choice. It's about how to compete differently from your competitors. Doing what competitors do not do, or doing what they can't do. It's only going to be successful when your strategy allows you to set your company apart from its rivals and stake out a market position that doesn't already have a lot of strong competitors. Well, that certainly makes sense. When we think about strategy as a choice, we actually are talking about the concept of strategy as a plan. And this is the way that a lot of people initially think about strategy. Another way to think about strategy is strategy as a pattern. Okay? Strategy as a pattern means that you need to look at many of the things that a company actually does, not just what its plan is, but all of the variety of things that the company itself does in the long run. And this is a figure from your textbook, identifying a company's strategy. Some of these things are actions to strengthen the firm's bargaining position, actions to enter a new product or geographic markets, for example, maybe making a decision to enter into Canada or Mexico, actions to upgrade, build, or acquire resources and capabilities. Is there something that you need to know how to do that you don't know yet? Actions to strengthen your competitive alliances and your partnerships. All of these things are patterns of action that the company takes, and when you step back and look at the pattern as a whole, you start to see that something that we call a strategy emerges. You can start to see the direction that the company is going to take. A third way of thinking about strategy is called positioning. Strategy as position. And there are a lot of different possible positions, and you've probably may have heard of these in some other courses. There's what's called the low-cost provider. That means the low-cost provider is the company that chooses to compete and position itself in the part of the market where people really appreciate a good deal, a low price. These may be people who have less money, or these may be people who are just sensitive to high costs and high prices. On the other side of the position is something that we call differentiation. Differentiation means that you are trying to provide a product that is unique and different in some way. One of the key elements associated with differentiation is high price. So when you see a product that's offered for a premium price, that is a differentiation position. One thing I want you to keep in mind when you hear the word differentiation, differentiation is not just about differences in the product itself. Differentiation is about how that product actually adds value to the customers. So just because your product is different doesn't mean you are following a differentiation strategy. We'll get into this in more detail much later in the course. As you can see, there are also some other positions here: a focused low cost, best cost provider, and focused differentiation. We have a whole chapter on competitive positioning, so I don't really want to go into a lot of this here. But basically what this means, it's that you're trying to pick the piece of the market that you think you can make money in for your company. Now, one concept that we need to understand, and that is absolutely critical for any company, is this idea of competitive advantage. This requires meeting customer needs either more effectively with products or services, or more efficiently. Now, do you see how this lines up with the differentiation? Products that they value more highly. And when you see that value more highly, that translates into dollars. Okay? Or more efficiently, that reminds us of that low cost position. So that means you're providing products at a lower cost, and in this case, also a lower price to customers. So not only are you providing a product at a lower cost than your competitors, but generally you're offering that at a lower price as well. A sustainable competitive advantage, though, is a little different than just a competitive advantage. A sustainable competitive advantage means that you are allowing that competitive advantage to last for a long time. So lasting reasons. So what that means is that your competitive advantage is going to go a long time into the future, and that your competitors are not going to catch up. If you think about it, this is a very tough thing to do. What is going to be the first thing that your competitor is going to do if you are doing something more effectively than your competitor or more efficiently than your competitor? If you have figured something out, what are they going to do? Well, eventually they're going to copy it. So when they copy it, that takes away your competitive advantage. Someone who has a sustainable competitive advantage, though, is able to always stay ahead of the competition and come up with new ways to either be more efficient or new ways to be more effective. To sustain your competitive advantage, you need to be able to use your plan, understand your strategic pattern, and know your intended competitive position so that you can always stay ahead of the competition. How do you create a sustainable competitive advantage? One way is to develop expertise and capabilities over the long term that your rivals can't match. Think about Apple. Apple has a large set of capabilities and expertise that other companies don't have. Even though other companies like Samsung might be able to match them on technology, Apple also has a wide network of retail stores that allows them to actually touch the customer and convince the customer to buy additional product. In addition, you also want to think about how your competitive advantage fits with your strategy. You want to put it center stage. How do you keep your competitive advantage? What competitive advantage is important to your customers? That should drive your strategy. This is easy to say and hard to do. If it was easy, everyone would have a sustainable competitive advantage. And one of the facts of business life is that it's all about trying to take away the competitive advantage from the other companies in your industry. If you think about Sears and Kmart, how are they doing right now? And if you don't know, you should go and look it up. How is Kmart doing relative to Walmart? Well, we don't hear a whole lot about blue light specials anymore, if that gives you any hint. Okay, so if a company's strategy is really based on a set of plans or actions that they're trying to take to maintain their competitive advantage, why would they ever change it? Well, what happens is that the environment changes. You might see changes in the market conditions. Maybe your customers are growing older. You might see changes in technology. You might see different things that competitors are doing. Just recently, in summer of 2017, Amazon purchased Whole Foods. That was a very big surprise to the grocery business and competitors like Kroger's, but it also was a surprise to other competitors in the market like Walmart online, as well as a company like Alibaba. So that particular move is going to have a big ripple effect and is going to change the plans of a lot of other companies. Shifting buyer needs. One of the things that we look at in our analysis of a company's environment is, who are their buyers? What do they want? How are they changing? One of the issues that the company, the Gap, is dealing with is that when they were initially founded, they targeted the group that are now baby boomers. But those baby boomers don't buy khaki pants and polo shirts the way they used to. So Gap is actually still struggling after many years of trying to redefine itself. There are also new emerging market opportunities. Things are invented every day that provide opportunities for new industries to emerge. And there are always new ideas for improving the strategy that you already have. Understanding the fact that things are going to change is why you need to understand the strategic pattern that your company is engaged in. When you see the pattern that emerges from a set of companies, the actions that a company takes, this is called the realized strategy. The realized strategy is different than the deliberate strategy that might have been identified as part of the plan, and the emergent strategy that actually happens in response to changes in the marketplace and in the environment. There may be things that were in your plan that you have had to give up, and you might have come up with some new strategy elements that no longer fit into your previous strategy. This is the figure in your chapter that actually kind of explains the idea of what a realized strategy is. And there is a distinction between what the actual overall strategy of a company is and how that is different from the idea of the planned part of strategy and the emergent part of strategy that reacts to changes in the environment. Something that is a little different than the firm's strategy, but also very important, is the firm's business model. The business model is basically how the firm will make money, not just how the firm will position itself or what the firm's plan is, but how is the company actually going to make money. The way that you make money is by providing customers with value. Now, what is value? Value means something that the customers want, something that they may even need, but not just what do they want and what do they need or what might be a good idea, but what are they willing to pay for and how much are they willing to pay. You can have a great idea, but if you can't get anyone to pay for it, then you don't have much of a business. This is called the customer value proposition, and the customer's value proposition simply means that you, as the firm owner or the firm CEO, has to understand what it is about what you are providing that is worth it to the customer to pay for. When you generate revenues that are sufficient to cover your costs of production and to give you the kind of profit you want, you have what is called the firm's profit formula. Until you know what your profit formula is, you won't know whether or not your strategy is successful or how your strategy can be successful. Your strategy is all about how to make this happen. It takes a proven business model, one that yields appealing profitability, to demonstrate market viability of a firm's strategy. What that means is that if you don't make any money, your strategy is not any good. The realized strategy, which if you remember, comes from the plan and the adaptations based on changes in the environment. These are the things that are inside the company. All right, so this is your realized strategy. Can you make money? Only if your business model and the value proposition yields profit. And that depends on how well your company actually competes, not just in its strategy inside the company in its own mind, but how does it do when you take that strategy out and try to see if it is actually going to work in the market. So what the business model is, the relationship between the firm strategy and the business model, is what your company is trying to create with the strategy and the money that you are going to try to achieve, the profit you're going to try to achieve. The customer value proposition means that you are satisfying the buyer wants and needs at a price that the customers consider to be a good value. Now, the idea of what is a good value as opposed to a bad value is subjective, and it depends on the customer. For example, there may be some people who think that spending $175 for a pair of Nike tennis shoes is not a good value. Other people, however, would disagree and are very willing to fork over $175 for a pair of brand new red tennis shoes. In your textbook, you will see an equation where V represents the value provided and P represents price. So the more attractive the value proposition is to the customer, the bigger the difference there will be between P and V. If you're smart, you're trying to get your P as close to V as possible. Here's what the profit formula looks like. You want the value provided to the customers to be greater than the difference between the price that you charge, and the price that you charge has to be greater than the cost. The lower the cost for a given customer value proposition, the greater the ability of the business model to be a moneymaker. So whether that means that you keep your costs low or your prices high, the more that you can actually link your price to your value and keep your costs below your price, the more likely it is you'll be successful. Now that seems very simple, and it is. If you want to think about this a little bit more, go to page 11 in your chapter and look at the value proposition for Pandora, Sirius XM, and radio. These are three different ways that you and I might get tunes and news and entertainment, but they represent three very different business models and value propositions. Amazon has begun to acquire its own fleet of cargo planes to deliver packages to customers. And this can provide us an example of how the value, price, and cost factors are associated with Amazon's business model. Well, one thing that we know about Amazon is that its position is low cost. One reason that people like to buy from Amazon is because it's cheaper. They also have a wide variety of different kinds of items. You can find almost anything at Amazon. But what really is the important element is that not only is it low cost and not only can you get what you want, but it can be delivered right to your door. Now, if it's going to be delivered, who's going to be delivering it? Well, here were Amazon's options. They could go to the post office and they could send everything through the mail. They also could go through UPS or they could go through FedEx. But every time they used one of these carriers, they had to rely on those companies to actually make sure that their customers were happy by getting the delivery when they wanted. So that is part of their value proposition and part of their cost. If Amazon can buy its own fleet of cargo planes and deliver packages to their customers for less than what they can pay the post office or UPS or FedEx, then that is a way to save money and to ensure that their packages arrive when they want to, when the packages are wanted by the customer. This is how the business model of Amazon is helped by this particular strategic action. So how do we know if our strategy is a winner? How do we know if our strategy is going to work? First, we want to see if it passes the fit test. Does the strategy make sense relative to what we know about what is going on in the external environment and based on what we know about what our company is able to do, what we call the internal environment? So that's the fit test. Does your company's internal aspects, its product, its product characteristics, the way it runs its business, does it fit with the changes that are happening in the external environment? The second test is, does the strategy help the firm achieve a sustainable competitive advantage? Remember, a competitive advantage means that your company is doing something better than your competitors and you're able to make higher profits because of that competitive advantage. Now, a higher test is it sustainable? Have you been able to keep this up over a long period of time? Is your competitive advantage something that is very hard for anyone else to imitate? The third test is the performance test, and this is probably the most important test. Is it going to produce superior financial performance as indicated by the firm's profitability and financial and competitive strengths and market share? So performance here is seen as financial performance, competitive performance, and market performance. So how well is your company and your strategy able to result in superior performance across the board? Okay, so what have we learned? Why is strategy important? Strategy provides a prescription for doing business. It helps us understand the direction that we're going. A roadmap for competitive advantage. How are we going to do better than our competitors and how are we going to stay ahead of them? A game plan for pleasing customers. Understanding what our value proposition is and understanding how to communicate that value proposition to our customers and getting the prices that we want. And then finally, a formula for attaining long-term standout market performance. And remember, by market performance, we mean financial performance, competitive performance, and market share. If we can't achieve marketplace performance, then we need to revise and rework our strategy. Good strategy plus good strategy execution equals good management. How well a company performs is directly attributable to the caliber of its strategy and the proficiency with which the strategy is executed. So it's one thing to have a good strategy, and then it's another thing to follow through. Now here's just an example using Starbucks, which was a company that was mentioned in your chapter, to show you how some of the different elements of strategy show up. Key elements of Starbucks strategy in terms of their action plan. They were training baristas to serve a variety of special coffee products. They emphasize their store ambiance and elevation of the customer experience at Starbucks stores. So it's not just what the store looks like, it's how the customer experiences the store. They purchase and roast only top quality coffee beans. They foster a commitment to corporate responsibility. They expand the number of Starbucks stores domestically and internationally. They periodically refresh their product offerings, and they fully exploit the growing power of the Starbucks name and brand image with out-of-store sales. So this is the action plan. This is what they intend to do. Here's a pattern that you can also see by looking at what Starbucks has actually done. It is in many ways very consistent with their action plan. They started with wanting a good coffee shop. They worked to find the right kind of coffee that was consistent with their fair trade corporate values. They had to get into the coffee supply business to really get what they wanted. That was not something that they intended in their plan at the very beginning. Once they were in the coffee supply business, they gained a following and they started selling packaged coffee because they were doing the sourcing anyway. They had to get in the coffee supply business, so in addition to supplying their own coffee stores, they now also supply grocery stores, and you can buy Starbucks coffee in a packaged form. At one point, they did get into the music business, and you still might see a few CDs now and then in a Starbucks store, but that turned out to be something that they abandoned. They've also tried to sell wine in the evenings, which they thought was somewhat consistent with the types of people they were trying to attract, and they thought would enhance the experience in the store, but that also has not really worked as well as they had hoped. Starbucks, probably without intending it at the beginning, have ended up competing with McDonald's by offering food, so they are considered to be one of McDonald's largest competitors. If you think about Starbucks' strategy in terms of its competitive position, they have a high-priced coffee product. This is a premium price. They have a unique blend and taste of their coffee. They have unique sourcing of their fair trade coffee. They have trained their baristas to know your name and your preferences, and they write it on the cups. They also pay more for those baristas, so that's consistent with trying to establish a higher quality expectation for the people that work for them. And they always have a very nice physical location. It's upscale. They have to pay more for those locations and that decor. If you put all these pieces together, a high price, unique taste, unique sourcing, higher pay for good employees, and upscale locations, you have a position that you will recognize as differentiation. Now let's talk just a little bit about the key elements of Starbucks' value proposition. What is it that they are bringing to their customer that makes their customer pay a premium price for Starbucks coffee? Because if you think about it, you can get a cup of coffee a whole lot less than what you pay at Starbucks. If you go to McDonald's, you can have a cup of coffee for about $1, or you could pay a little more. But why do people drink Starbucks? Well, if you drink Starbucks, it says something about you as a person. And not only are you drinking it for the coffee itself, the physical product, and the experience, but it says something about you. It says that you know something about coffee. Also, it is a special kind of coffee for a special kind of person. If you're a special kind of person, then you're worth the extra money, aren't you? The coffee is more, but it's worth it, but not just because of the coffee, but because Starbucks spends more on its people, the baristas, and it spends more money on the coffee farmers themselves. And since Starbucks cares about people and Starbucks cares about coffee farmers, by extension, you, their customer, must be a pretty nice person as well. Also, if you can afford Starbucks, that means you must be doing well financially. So you're sending a signal to all the other people that see you that you are doing okay and can afford a $5 cup of coffee. And if you can afford Starbucks and if you can hang out at the nice coffee shop, that also says that you are a cool and sophisticated person. And again, cool and sophisticated people, they don't pay $1 at McDonald's, they go to Starbucks. So the value proposition is an interesting thing. In this case, it's actually a physical product, it's an experience and a location, but it's also what Starbucks makes people feel like by buying it. So a value proposition can be a very interesting and complex thing. This is all we have for today in this chapter. I hope this is going to get you off to a good start in understanding all of the elements of strategy that we will be unpacking from here on out. I'll see you in the next video.